In the mist-shrouded valleys of northern England, where the Industrial Revolution's early smoke mingled with ancient superstitions, there once stood a forgotten institution. Drummond Academy for Exceptional Youth, established in 1796, was neither a school as we understand them today, nor quite a hospital. Of the 87 children admitted during its first decade of operation, only 31 would ever be seen by their families again. The rest simply vanished from record. Recently unsealed documents from the Royal Medical Society archives reveal a collection of journals, correspondence, and clinical notes, kept hidden for over 2 centuries under royal decree. These yellowed pages tell a story that challenges our understanding of medical history and the price of progress. The handwriting belongs to one Dr. Timothy Drummond, whose name has been systematically erased from medical textbooks despite his once celebrated contributions to early neurology. "I have discovered something quite remarkable in the boy," reads one entry, dated November 1796. "Something that defies natural law, something that, if properly understood and harnessed, could fundamentally transform our understanding of the human condition." The pages that follow document a descent that begins with scientific curiosity and ends somewhere far darker. Are you prepared to learn what happens when ambition blinds a brilliant mind to humanity? This isn't a tale of supernatural forces or demonic possession. What happened at Drummond Academy was something far more terrifying and entirely human. The village of Thornfield sat in a narrow valley where fog lingered until midday and returned before sunset. The damp air carried the distant clanking of early factories, yet the village remained isolated by dense woods and impassable roads during winter months. The locals kept to themselves, eyes downcast when travelers passed through, as if hiding secrets too burdensome to share. Atop the highest hill stood Drummond Academy, a former manor house whose grey stone walls seemed to absorb what little sunlight filtered through the perpetual mist. Its windows, tall and numerous, reflected nothing, a detail that would later take on disturbing significance. Dr. Timothy Drummond had acquired the property using funds from several prominent London physicians and scientists who shared his vision. A revolutionary approach to studying and correcting abnormalities of the youthful mind. Drummond himself cut an impressive figure, tall, meticulously groomed, with piercing blue eyes that contemporaries described as unnervingly perceptive. A graduate of Edinburgh Medical School, he had shown early brilliance in anatomy and nervous disorders. His theories about the physical basis of consciousness had initially been dismissed as radical, even heretical. But by 1796, with the scientific world embracing rationalism and methodical inquiry, Drummond found patrons willing to fund his research away from prying eyes. The staff consisted of 6 medical assistants, young men eager to advance in the emerging field of psychology, and a dozen attendants responsible for the children's physical needs. A Mrs. Harding served as matron, managing the domestic affairs with cold efficiency. The local vicar, Reverend Thomas Blackwood, visited monthly to provide spiritual guidance, though his journals later revealed growing unease with what he witnessed. "The Academy accepts children with unique conditions," Drummond wrote in his promotional materials sent to wealthy families struggling with difficult offspring. "Melancholia, excessive imagination, moral degeneration, and nervous excitability can all be remedied through our scientific methods." What the brochure didn't mention was Drummond's particular interest in children who exhibited what he called perception anomalies, those who saw, heard, or sensed things others could not. Martha Winters was the first to notice something amiss. A young shepherdess of 16, she often grazed her flock on the hills below the academy. One crisp October morning in 1796, she observed a small boy standing alone in the academy's walled garden. What caught her attention wasn't his solitary presence, but rather what appeared to be missing. Despite the bright autumn sun, the child cast no shadow upon the ground. Martha rubbed her eyes, certain they deceived her. Yet when she looked again, the phenomenon remained. The boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, stood perfectly still, facing the sun, while the shadows of trees, walls, and garden statues stretched normally around him. Where his shadow should have fallen, there was only uninterrupted light. When she reported this curiosity to the village constable, he dismissed her account as female hysteria. "Girls your age should mind sheep, not invent ghost stories," he scolded. The local physician suggested she might be suffering from rural melancholia and prescribed herb tonics. Only her grandmother listened with grave attention, before warning her never to approach the academy or speak of what she'd seen again. But Martha couldn't forget. Over subsequent weeks she spotted the shadowless boy 3 more times, always alone in the garden, always perfectly still. On her 4th sighting, something new happened. Dr. Drummond himself appeared, accompanied by 2 assistants carrying strange equipment. They surrounded the boy, taking measurements and notes while he remained motionless. Martha would later swear that when Drummond placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, the doctor's own shadow briefly flickered and dimmed. That night, Martha woke to a tapping at her window. Outside stood a pale woman in a nightdress, her eyes wide with desperation. "Have you seen him, my son?" she whispered through the glass. "They said he needed treatment for his nerves, but his letters stopped coming. Please, have you seen a boy with golden hair?" Before Martha could answer, the woman vanished into the darkness, leaving only footprints in the frost. Footprints that stopped abruptly at the edge of the road, as if their maker had been lifted into the air. The following morning, Martha found herself unable to speak. Her voice returned 3 days later, but by then strange changes had begun at the academy. Heavy drapes appeared over all windows. Deliveries of unusual equipment arrived under cover of darkness. Glass containers, electrical apparatus, and surgical tools from London. Most disturbing were the mirrors. Dozens of them, of all sizes, carried up the hill by laborers sworn to secrecy. Within a month, the first children began returning to their families. They appeared physically unharmed, even healthy, but changed in ways that chilled the blood of those who had known them before. Their movements were mechanical, their speech flat and emotionless. Most troubling of all, they could not recognize their own reflections, turning away from mirrors in apparent confusion. "Subject responds well to the separation procedure," read one of Drummond's notes, recently discovered. "The extraction is becoming more efficient with each attempt. We lose less of the baseline personality, though compliance remains absolute. The harvested material maintains integrity when properly stored. Lord W. will be most pleased with our progress." The winter of 1796 brought record cold to Thornfield, freezing the nearby river solid and isolating the village further. As Christmas approached, the academy received 3 new arrivals, all boys between 8 and 10 years of age, all from prominent families, all described in their admission papers as suffering from persistent fantasies and moral irregularities. Among them was Oliver Pembroke, the 10-year-old son of a naval captain currently at sea. Brought by his uncle, the boy was unusually articulate and observant. "There's something wrong with this place," he whispered to Martha when their paths crossed at the village church. "The other children, they don't dream anymore." Before he could explain further, Mrs. Harding whisked him away, her bony fingers digging visibly into his shoulder. It was Oliver who began keeping a secret record. Using a stub of charcoal pilfered from the kitchen, he documented his observations on scraps of paper hidden beneath a loose floorboard. His notes, discovered over a century later during renovations, provide the only patient perspective on Drummond's methods. "The new boys are taken to the mirror room first," he wrote in a childish but precise hand. "They return quiet and confused. William came back yesterday and didn't recognize me, though we've shared a room for a week. At night, I hear Dr. D and his assistants moving something heavy through the corridors. Glass containers, I think. They clink softly, and whatever is inside seems to move on its own, casting strange lights on the walls." Oliver documented the daily routines: morning inspections where pupils were checked for shadow integrity, afternoon sessions in private rooms with Drummond, evening meals taken in silence. Most disturbing was his description of the tank, a glass enclosure filled with what he described as liquid darkness that seemed to move with purpose when Drummond approached. Martha, increasingly concerned by the changes she observed, began watching the academy more carefully. She noticed that children who entered vibrant and active would within weeks move differently, as if something essential had been removed from them. They followed instructions perfectly, but initiated nothing on their own. Most disturbing was their reaction to sunlight. They neither squinted nor shielded their eyes, staring directly into the brightness without discomfort. One day in late January, Martha observed something that confirmed her worst fears. As a group of boys walked the grounds under supervision, she noticed their shadows, not missing like the first boys, but somehow wrong. The shadow seemed slightly delayed, moving a fraction of a second after the children themselves. When one boy stopped suddenly, his shadow continued briefly before jerking back into position. That night, Martha made a decision that would change everything. Waiting until her family slept, she wrapped herself in dark clothes and set out for the academy. A service entrance, used by kitchen deliveries, had a lock she knew could be manipulated with a thin blade. Once inside, she navigated by moonlight through corridors that smelled of chemicals and something less identifiable, something metallic and vaguely sweet. Following the sound of humming machinery, Martha discovered a converted ballroom on the manor's east wing. Peering through a keyhole, she witnessed Dr. Drummond and 3 assistants surrounding a child strapped to a table. The boy, she recognized him as quiet, dark-haired William, lay perfectly still as Drummond adjusted a complex apparatus above him. Multiple mirrors positioned at precise angles reflected and focused lamplight onto the child's body. "Begin the extraction," Drummond ordered, his voice clinical and detached. One assistant turned a brass dial and the mirrors shifted position. Where their reflected light converged on the boy's chest, something extraordinary and terrible occurred. A darkness began to separate from his body. Not a shadow cast by light, but something that seemed to emerge from within him. This darkness hovered above William, maintaining his exact shape but moving independently, writhing as if in pain. Drummond guided it carefully toward a glass container while dictating observations to an assistant. Subject's essence shows exceptional vitality. Note the density and coherence. This specimen should provide at least 3 complete treatments for Lord Wellington's son. Martha must have made some small sound, for Drummond suddenly turned toward the door. She fled, heart pounding, back through the corridors. Behind her, she heard voices raised in alarm and footsteps giving chase. She escaped into the winter night, running until her lungs burned in the cold air, not stopping until she reached the safety of her family's cottage. The next morning, Martha found herself unable to speak of what she'd witnessed. Not due to fear or shock, but physically unable. Her voice simply produced no sound when she tried to describe the scene in the ballroom. She could speak normally on any other subject, but any attempt to reveal Drummond's activities resulted in complete vocal paralysis. Later, medical examinations would find no physical cause for this selective muteness. Meanwhile, Oliver Pembroke continued his clandestine documentation. His notes grew increasingly alarmed as February progressed. "They took Thomas yesterday. He fought them, so they used the drops that make you sleep. When he came back, he wouldn't look at me. I asked his name, and he had to think before answering. His shadow is wrong now. Too dark in some places, too light in others. Dr. D seems pleased with whatever he took from Thomas. I heard him say it was the purest specimen yet." Oliver's final entry, dated February 17, 1797, contains a chilling premonition. "I am to go to the mirror room tomorrow. Dr. D says I'm special, that my perception anomaly makes me uniquely valuable. He doesn't know that I can see what's in the glass containers. They're not shadows or reflections. They're pieces of souls. I've hidden these notes where I hope someone will find them. If you're reading this, Please know that I was Oliver Pembroke, and I had dreams of becoming a sea captain like my father. The following day, a fire broke out in the east wing of Drummond Academy. Whether by accident or design remains unknown, but the blaze spread quickly through the old building. Villagers formed a bucket chain, more concerned with preventing the fire from spreading to the forest than with saving the academy itself. As they worked, they witnessed a strange phenomenon. Several children walked calmly out of the burning building, showing no fear or distress, moving in perfect unison like marionettes controlled by a single hand. More disturbing were the shadows that emerged independently, flowing across the ground without corresponding bodies, gathering at the tree line like a dark pool before disappearing into the forest. Several villagers reported seeing the shadowless boy from Martha's earlier account, standing at an upper window, his face expressionless as flames rose around him. Most unsettling was the testimony of Reverend Blackwood, who claimed to have seen Dr. Drummond exit the building carrying a case of glass containers that moved with a life of their own, filled with darkness that seemed to watch me as they passed. By dawn, the main building of Drummond Academy stood in ruins, smoke still rising from charred timbers. The death toll remained uncertain. Records showed 23 children in residence, but only 16 bodies were recovered. Dr. Drummond and 4 of his assistants were listed among the missing, presumed dead. Official reports attributed the fire to an overturned lamp, and the academy tragedy soon faded from public discourse. But in Thornfield, whispers persisted. Children avoided the ruins, claiming they could hear faint crying among the blackened stones. Dogs refused to approach the site, growing agitated and fearful when forced nearby. Most telling was the curious fact that on sunny days, the ruins cast shadows that seemed too dark and substantial for their diminished physical presence. Martha Winters, still unable to speak about what she had witnessed, took to drawing obsessively. Her sketches, preserved by her family and eventually donated to the Thornfield Historical Society, depicted children with missing or distorted shadows, glass containers holding writhing darkness, and a tall figure whose own shadow seemed composed of many smaller ones. The margin of one drawing bears a message written in a childish hand, not her own. "Find us." 3 months after the fire, Oliver Pembroke's father returned from sea. Captain James Pembroke, inconsolable at the news of his son's death, demanded a thorough investigation. His naval connections secured the attention of a London magistrate, who arrived in Thornfield that summer to conduct interviews and examine evidence. The investigation might have ended with the official explanation had the magistrate not encountered something inexplicable on the academy grounds. While examining the ruins at dusk, he reported feeling a distinct sensation of being touched by small, cold hands. More significantly, when he returned to his lodgings, he discovered a perfect handprint, too small to belong to an adult, burned into the leather of his document case. The case had contained Oliver's recovered journals. The magistrate's subsequent report, sealed for 2 centuries and only recently declassified, documents a disturbing pattern of evidence. Multiple families reported that children returned from Drummond Academy before the fire exhibited identical symptoms: emotional detachment, amnesia regarding their time at the school, inability to recognize their reflections, and most bizarrely, shadows that sometimes moved independently of their bodies. Most compelling was the testimony of Mrs. Eleanor Pembroke, Oliver's aunt, who claimed that 1 month after the fire, she saw her nephew standing in her garden at night. "It was unmistakably Oliver, yet somehow less than him," she stated. "He spoke without moving his lips, telling me that Dr. Drummond had taken something precious from him and the others. When I reached for him, my hands passed through empty air, though his form appeared solid. Before vanishing, he whispered, 'We are kept in the glass.'" The magistrate's investigation led him to Lord Wellington, whose son had allegedly received treatments derived from Drummond's work. Wellington denied all knowledge, but abruptly sent his son to a remote family estate in Scotland. Household staff later reported that the boy, previously ill with a wasting condition, had made a miraculous recovery, but had become a stranger wearing familiar skin. Continuing his investigation against increasing political pressure, the magistrate discovered financial records showing that Drummond had received substantial funding from several prominent physicians and aristocrats. The money trail led to an abandoned warehouse in London, where customs officials discovered a hidden laboratory containing surgical equipment, specialized mirrors, and most damning 12 glass containers of varying sizes. According to the official report, these containers were empty when found. However, the magistrate's private notes tell a different story. The vessels contain no visible substance, yet they are undeniably occupied. When approached, the air within them shifts and roils as if agitated. When touched, they induce a profound melancholy and sensation of incompleteness in the handler. Most disturbing when placed in sunlight, they cast shadows despite containing nothing. Shadows of children. By autumn 1797, the magistrate found himself reassigned to a remote posting in the colonies, his investigation officially closed. The recovered equipment was transferred to the Royal Medical Society for proper scientific evaluation, and subsequently disappeared from record. The warehouse was demolished within a week. Martha Winters never regained her ability to speak about what she had witnessed. She lived in Thornfield until her death in 1863, working as the village schoolmistress. Former pupils remembered her kindness, but also her peculiar insistence that they count each other's shadows during outdoor play and report any anomalies immediately. As for Dr. Timothy Drummond, no trace of him was ever officially found. Yet over the subsequent decades, medical journals occasionally published revolutionary papers on consciousness and the nervous system by different authors. Papers that, when analyzed by modern linguistics experts, show remarkable similarities to Drummond's writing style. More troubling are scattered reports from psychiatric institutions across Europe describing doctors who harvested something from patients using specialized mirrors, leaving them compliant but emotionally vacant. The most recent connection to the Drummond case emerged in 1986, when renovations to a London medical museum uncovered a hidden vault containing a single glass container and a journal dated 1842. The journal, written in a hand matching Drummond's, contains only one entry. I have extended my natural life beyond all expectation. The shadows of children burn brightest and longest. With proper conservation, a single extraction can sustain me for a decade. I see now that immortality is attainable. One only needs to recognize that consciousness can be separated from its vessel and consumed. Museum staff reported that the glass container shattered inexplicably the night it was discovered, and security cameras recorded what appeared to be a small shadow moving across the floor before disappearing. The journal crumbled to dust when conservators attempted to preserve it, leaving the Drummond connection officially unverifiable. Today, the ruins of Drummond Academy are barely visible, a few stone foundations slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Local children still avoid the area, though they can't articulate why. Occasionally, hikers report glimpsing a boy standing among the trees, a boy who casts no shadow, even in the brightest sunlight. The full truth of what Timothy Drummond discovered about the nature of consciousness and how he exploited it remains buried in scattered archives and suppressed reports. Perhaps this is for the best. His research challenged not just medical ethics, but our fundamental understanding of what constitutes a human soul and whether it can exist independently of the body. What we do know with certainty is that in the quiet laboratories of history, scientific ambition has often outpaced moral consideration. Drummond may have discovered a physiological basis for what earlier generations called the soul, and in doing so, developed a method to extract, contain, and ultimately consume it. His legacy persists not in medical textbooks, but in the enduring folk wisdom of Thornfield, where parents still warn children to keep your shadow close and to beware of doctors who take too much interest in their dreams. As one final disturbing footnote, Of the 16 bodies recovered from the Academy fire, medical examiners noted that none cast shadows when placed in sunlight during preparation for burial. This detail, recorded matter-of-factly in the county coroner's report, was redacted from all public records, but not before Martha Winters added it to her growing collection of evidence about the boy with no shadow and the doctor who stole his soul. "When science separates what should remain whole," she wrote in her only known comment on the affair, "it creates not knowledge, but darkness with purpose."